Hi everyone, aloha, hafa day, and good afternoon for each of you attending from either Hawaii, Guam, or the mainland. I think I know most people here. I'm Al Ogata. I'm the president and CEO of Cyber Hawaii. Um, Cyber Hawaii is a nonprofit information sharing and workforce development organization that focuses on improving cyber resilience in Hawaii's small and mid-sized businesses, as well as within the community as a whole. Pretty much most of you know that we're supported by a number of organizations that are shown here. These organizations recognize the value of improving the cyber resilience of all organizations within the state and are helping to build strong cybersecurity architectures outside the boundaries of their own networks. We're also supported by strategic partners at the state of Hawaii and by federal agencies such as CISA, Homeland Security, the FBI, Coast Guard, and Secret Service. So with that introduction, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on Secure by Demand. Secure by Demand is a CISA initiative where software manufacturers, the companies that create, ship, and maintain software, make security a core consideration from the earliest stages of the product development lifecycle. Ensuring that the products they use and procure are secure by design is essential for organizations to be resilient against ransomware and other forms of malicious cyber activity. Software manufacturers strive to deliver the features customers request, so it's critical that customers explicitly demand security as part of the procurement process. Administratively for today's webinar questions can be entered into the chat window and will be read at pauses in the presentation. This presentation is also being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Cyber Hawaii website in a few days. In addition, the presenter has agreed that you can contact him after today's presentation should you have any questions or need assistance. His email address will appear during the presentation. And you all pretty much know who our presenter is for today, Giovanni Williams. Mr. Giovanni Williams is a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency cybersecurity advisor for the state of Hawaii and the U.S. territory of American Samoa. Giovanni is a seasoned cybersecurity subject matter expert with over 2 decades of experience spanning military, private sector, and federal government roles. He currently serves as a cybersecurity advisor for CISA, where he provides strategic leadership in fortifying the national critical infrastructure against evolving cyber threats. He is a certified information systems security professional and a recognized subject matter expert in cybersecurity strategy, risk management, and information security governance. His extensive experience in cyber threat intelligence, incident response, and regulatory compliance make him a trusted advisor in the field. And with that introduction, I'll turn the session over to Gio.
Hey, thanks so much, Al. It's a pleasure, everyone. Thank you all for having me again. Aloha, talofa, hafa. Nice to see you all again. And give me 1 second. Let me get these slides up really quick. Share screen so we can begin this journey. Here we go. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. Oops. You good to go, Al?
Yep, all set. It's all yours.
All right. All right, everybody. So, as Al alluded to, I'm from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. We're the nation's cybersecurity agency. We're here to build resilience and help you all protect your environments. So, as you all, if you haven't already, working with CISA, we definitely have a lot of different things that we can offer, things that we can help you with as far as understanding your resilience building within your cybersecurity programs. So today's topic is Secure by Demand. It's definitely a campaign that we've run over the last couple of years. So I'm going to explain what it means, and I'm going to go over some key concepts. So here's a look at some of the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about secure by demand. We're going to talk about why are we focusing on secure by demand now. We're going to go over some.
Say,
Excuse me.
Gio, your slides aren't turning.
Uh-oh.
We're still on the first slide.
Okay, give me 1 second then.
Okay, now I see these, Jen. Oh,
Give me a second. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
cue it back up. There we go. Let's just do that. And then we'll do this. How about now?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Looks good
And
now.
just to test, it's transitioning, correct?
Yes. Now we see the Secure by Demand title slide.
Perfect. All right.
You may want to hide the there's an app message on the screen.
I
Says,
got it.
yeah, there you go. Okay, all set.
Appreciate it. All
Mhm.
right, so we're going to go over some key
Yeah,
definitions.
I'm on a call, but
We're going to go over some
okay.
core principles.
Okay. Bye.
We're going to do a life cycle overview of of the life cycle in its different phases. I'm going to talk about some life cycle practices. We're going to go over the top secure by default controls that you can implement in your environment to help build better resilience. And then I've prepared the sessions for our in-person, the questions for our in-person session. So you can go back to your organizations and inquire so we can have a great discussion. And then at the end, I'm going to open it up to a discussion and Q&A. All right, so secure by demand. So secure by demand basically combines two major approaches, secure by design and secure by default, which encompasses secure by demand. And I'm going to explain the details of what each one of those approaches mean in a further slide. But just understand that there's three concepts. Secure by demand is the main concept, supported by secure by design and secure by default. So what are they basically? So basically, it's baking in security so that when you need it, it's going to be already there, and that way you don't have to try to add it on later, or as a lot of people say, bolt on security after the fact. So this is getting security in from the beginning throughout your planning and your implementation, your just every parts of your building of your whatever it is you're building. So some key objectives that we're going to cover today is I'm going to define those concepts, secure by design, secure by default, and secure by demand. We're going to talk about the life cycle of that. So from start to finish, where do you start, where do you finish, and just the structure of it. I'm going to give you some top secure practices that you can implement in your environment to help get after some of this stuff. And then at the end, we're going to discuss some adoption and governance. All right. So why are we talking about secure by demand? So one, everybody knows that breaches just lead to just costly challenges. And it also can lead to reputational damage within your organization. There's a lot of things to highlight over the last couple of years. I'll just throw some things out there. So we had solar winds, and please don't think I'm knocking these folks. I'm just some examples of some costly breaches. Solar winds, HCA, we've had Colonial Pipeline, we've had AT&T. There's just Marriott. There's so many breaches that have happened that have been costly to these organizations and that have exposed their organizations to some possible reputational damage, which also leads back to cost. So it's just really important for organizations to understand that you have to prepare yourself for these types of events. Otherwise, it could possibly ruin your business, or it could lead to extreme cost when trying to deal with the situation if you're not prepared. Security debt compounds. So as with some of the breaches we've seen, some of the breaches were not just a one and done kind of thing where the organizations had the breach. They were able to do their incident response plan. They were able to, implement their controls and then, reconstitute, get back to business, and then kind of move on for the breach. Sometimes some of these organizations were hit multiple times. So that compounds the financial debt or that costly problem that you could face when you're dealing with these breaches. So that's something you want to understand as well, is that the security, it could be a compounding cost if you're not prepared for it. And the second thing is as we talked about the reputational damage, just the customer impact. It could lead to a lack of trust in your customer base and how they feel towards your product, and how they deal with you as a business. Also, it could lead to, if you're under any type of regulatory compliance, it could lead to just a loss of trust with your regulator, which could also affect the business. So these are some key concepts to understand why you want to kind of focus on security by demand in your business. so that you don't have to deal with these types of challenges within your organization. All right, so let's define these key concepts. So the first thing is one of the approaches, which is secure by design. So secure by design is basically building security into your architecture from the ground up. And that's basically, if you're going to build a house, you're not going to start the house by building the roof, because the roof cannot be supported without the other structures of the home so that it can sit at the top of the house to cover you at the top. So most homes start with the foundation, with the actual foundations themselves on the ground, to make sure that the foundation is sturdy. And then there are certain pillars that are set within the home to help support the structural integrity of the home, so that when you lay the top over the home or the cover over the home, that it stays in place and it's there to protect the home from the elements. So you got the foundation, then you have the pillars, which are supported by the walls, which supports you from all sides, and then you have the cover, the top cover or the roof, that supports the top of the home. So when you're thinking about secure by design, you want to think of it as that concept in building a home. There's also other things that you want to take in consideration when you're building that home. Things such as like making sure you use fireproof materials, because you don't want your home to catch on fire. Making sure that your home is properly secured as far as like having ingress and egress locations in case of a fire. So just those are some security concepts, or the concept of security when you're building your home. It's the same when you're dealing with technology, or when you're dealing with your business. So you want to make sure that as you are moving through the process of developing the structures for your business, that you're taking these in consideration. The second concept is security by default. So what that means is basically when you deploy something in your environment, you're making sure that you're deploying it, or that when you're using something in your environment, that right off implementation, that it's safe before you like use it. You're taking the time to set it up to make sure it's safe, and then you're implementing it in your environment. And there's some structures behind that, and I'll go into that in a little more details. But if you just think of it as making sure that something is safe when you're using it right out of the box, as best as possible, is a way to kind of get your mind wrapped around that concept. And the main topic, which combines both of these topics, this design and by default, is the secure by demand. So basically, by utilizing both of those approaches, your organization will have the ability to deliver secure outcomes rapidly. And when I say rapidly, those outcomes should be able to be deployed in a rapid manner in case you do have some type of a significant impact to your business. So if you look at just different cultures and different systems, there's different security solutions that are utilized when needed. So by having these key approaches within your organization and utilizing them, you'll be able to rapidly deploy those solutions and understand their impact in your environment and organizations when needed. All right. So here are some of the core principles with these three concepts that I just talked about: secure by design, secure by default, and secure by demand, but in totality, secure by demand. The first one being to minimize your attack surface. So earlier we talked about building that house. So when you're building your house, I mean, if you look at the average home, when you're looking at how many doors can access the home, it's usually only a few. Most homes have maybe two doors, maybe three doors, depending on the size of the home. But I don't know more homes that have 20 doors on the home, like a door on every wall. So when you're thinking about minimizing your attack surface, just think of it like that. How many doors am I having within my environment that could let someone in. And if you do have a door, you want to find it, and you want to, if at all possible, get rid of that door, and build a wall, because that wall will block out, someone trying to get in. So think of it when you're thinking about minimizing your attack surface. Just remember that concept: as few doors as possible. The next core principle is assume compromise. And when I say assume compromise, I'm talking about, like, you should design your system so that if it's breach, the damage can be contained. So you want to design your system with the thought that, okay, there's a high probability that this is going to be breached, and if it is breached, here are the things that I know are already in place that can, one, isolate this, mitigate, and get me back to the continuity of business that I need to keep going. So if you design your system that way, and it will help you tremendously. The next core concept is least privileged access. So that concept, easily explained, you only give access to the people who need it and nothing more. And you only give them access to what they need. So when you're building out your roles and responsibilities within your organization, you really want to think about that. You want to think about what, HR needs and what they need access to. You want to think about what the security department needs and what they need access to. Every department and every role in your organization should be thought about and assessed, as far as the access needs, so that you can make sure that they only have what they need. The next concept, or core principle, is verified supply chain. It's a quote by, I think the president was Ronald Reagan. But you can trust, but you must verify. So you want to make sure you know where all of your components and things that you use in your organization come from. And not only come from, you want to understand their quality. You want to understand their structure. You want to understand the businesses behind them, because that is all a reflection of your business. So if one of those components goes out, when they're looking at your business, they're looking at you. I don't know if you're going to be able to go and say, like, hey, we had this component from this business and that's why we're down. I don't. Your users are looking at you as a business, but you should understand that that's a representation of you. So when it comes to those components and where they're coming from, make sure your teams are doing their research on those components, where they're built, how they're secured, because that'll help you out in the long run as far as you implementing into your environment, and you securing it. And the final core principle is observability and recovery. So, observability is the ability to observe what's going on in your environment. And this is both technical and non technical. So, if you think about it from a physical security perspective, you want to know who's coming in and going out of your buildings, or your spaces, because you want to make sure that it's your employees, so that people ain't walking out with stuff that they shouldn't have, or having access to things that they shouldn't have. And from a technology perspective, you want to make sure that you're observing your environment as far as where the information is coming from and where the information is going and who is accessing that information, and when, so that you can understand what's going on. You can detect things as early as possible. And the second part of that principle is recovery. It is highly important that you understand the effects to your business, so that you can recover as fast as possible, so that you can maintain the continuity of business that your business requires in order to meet your demand, or to meet whatever the expectation is on your business. All right. So now we're going to move into the life cycle. So the first part of the life cycle is requirements. So in the requirements phase, this is a lot of discovery. You want to really talk this through with the teams. You want to discover as much as possible. Talk with other people within your sector. Understand some of the things that are happening within that sector in the current news cycles. What's going on? There's so many different information platforms that you can utilize to help kind of scope you in on your requirements. Security stories, abuse cases, any of those kind of things can help you kind of develop requirements. Also, those departments, the people who work in those departments, they're really good at giving you, the things that they need in order to do the business for your business. So in your requirements development, make sure you're defining the security components of it as early as possible, because a lot of times those are the most costly to implement. But also make sure you're doing your due diligence to do the research to make sure that you're identifying as much as possible, and then kind of tailoring that in, scoping it into what you need. The second part is the design. So when you're designing your environment, the best you can do is try to predict where the attackers could exploit. And the best way to do that is by utilizing threat models. There's different types of threat models that you can use, but you definitely want to do a little research. And as I talked about in the requirements phase, a lot of that research is going to kind of carry over into the design phase. It's going to help you kind of really hone in on what you're trying to protect, with what you're trying to build, and that'll help you kind of identify those threats, and predict where those attackers could possibly exploit. The next phase is I like to call it the the oh my god, we might break it phase, is implementation. So when it comes to preparing or implementing the tool, you it's not going to be perfect, but you want to try to get it as good as possible. So utilizing different tools and practices, secure tools and practices in the implementation, making sure that you have identified the types of controls that you need for your environment, that best suits your business. Some examples are things like safe libraries. You want to make sure that no passwords are hard coded into whatever you're implementing. It's a best business practice. So please try to do that as best as possible. But you give it a whirl, see how it goes. Collect your lessons learned and go from there. Next is the build portion of the life cycle. And that is where you get to kind of look at the code or look at the hardware. You want to verify different things. So you want to verify the functionality of the hardware, making sure that the different components work according to the specs. And there's ways to validate that. You also, when looking at software, you want to verify the code. You want to verify that the code is written as, however it should be designed. And if there are any security challenges within that code, that could hinder your business, or could pose a challenge later on. And there's different, automated tools that you can utilize to kind of look at this stuff. It's different. It will vary based on businesses and what the components you use. But you definitely want to use just different tools. Things like artifact signing will help you kind of get through the build phase. So the next phase is the release phase. And that's where you're actually going to start to release the devices or components or the code within your environment. And it's right now we're actually kind of going into production. So at this point, you want to basically ensure that whatever you're delivering is as safe as possible, through testing. And you would have did a lot of this during the implementation and build phase, but this is your last opportunity to kind of make sure that it's safe. Um, in the release phase, it's usually asked if you could do like progressive development as far as like releasing things in phases so that you don't just break everything at once if it does break, or that it gives you an opportunity to kind of react to the changes within your environment. Also, within the release phase, you want to make sure that the configurations that you're using are secure as possible. And that way, when you're releasing them, there's a lot less rework on your teams as far as evaluating the security controls within those components as they are in operation. And then the last phase of the life cycle overview is actually operating. That is just while you have implemented these tools, or this software, this hardware, or just these different things within your organization. You want to make sure that you're monitoring them, you're constantly monitoring them. And this is the challenge most organizations run into, because usually a lot of organizations, after they put things into production or they release things into their organizations, the monitoring usually kind of tailors back, and then people forget about things. But you want to make sure, as you are implementing things within your organization, you want to constantly monitoring them so that you can continuously improve them over time. That way, you might not get it right the first time, but the second, third, fourth iteration, it just keeps getting better. It also helps you prepare for incidents, because if you're understanding these items in operation and you're constantly monitoring them, when you see anomalies or you see activity that's not normal, it's a lot easier to identify and kind of target in on. And then that maybe a lot of times you can catch these things before they happen, some of the cyber incidents. All right, so as I just went over, it's basically the life cycle in practice. I kind of went over requirements, talking about security stories and abuse cases. I went over the design, going through threat modeling, the implementation. We talked about safe libraries, no hard coded secrets, or secrets is passwords. You don't want your passwords in hard coded into any of your devices or your software. Um, During the bill phase, software bills of materials. That's just the different components, where they come from. And then artifact signing, we talked about that. Um, Release phase, ensuring as safe as a delivery as possible. That's that's best effort. There's no perfection. And then operation, we talked about constant monitoring and preparation for how it can help you with preparation for incidents. All right. So the next thing we're going to go over are the top 10 secure by default controls. And these things are some things that you can take this list, you can go back to your organization, and you can kind of start going down it. And if you're doing some of these things, hopefully you're doing all these things. It's going to help you tremendously in basically ensuring your organization has resilience built in. So the first one, we talk about this one a lot, is multi-factor authentication. So what multi-factor authentication does is it one, it helps make sure that stolen passwords basically are very difficult to use, because even if I get your password, there's still another factor that I need in order for your system to grant me access. So I could have your password rainbow123. I type it in, but it's not going to let me in because I still need maybe a 6-digit code from an authenticator that you guys issue at your organization, or I need to scan, my retina, or maybe I need a face scan. Whatever other factor that you implement, it just adds another layer of security to protect. The next thing, and we talked about it, is least privilege. Basically, making sure that people only have access to what they need. And what this does is this reduces your risk if an account is compromised, so maybe let's say maybe Keone's account got compromised. Well, because Keone only has access to this one file store, he doesn't have access to anything else on the environment. You know, it's easy to we can disable his account, but it's not like if say let's say another guy.
Admin.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, maybe it's not like another guy, George, who basically, he's an admin. If his account gets compromised, now an adversary has access to, not only the file shares, but the databases, administrative tools, security things that we use for monitoring, things of that nature. So it's always good to have least privilege. The next control is secure transport layer security. So this is basically a modern encryption standard to protect data. But you want to make sure, you want to validate, or you want to verify that your system is utilizing it to make sure that your data is being encrypted in transit. When when I was talking about inbound and outbound traffic, you want to make sure that your data is being encrypted as it is, coming in and leaving your environment, whatever your data standard may be. The next control is automatic updates. So a lot of organizations turn this off because they have a lot of tailored things within their organization, and sometimes these things could break other things. But if you have utilized the life cycle as we talked about earlier, it should be less of a burden to have this on, because you will always understand, or you will have a good understanding of the impacts of the updates as they're coming in. So a lot of organizations will test those updates prior to implementation. But it depends on how much of an understanding you have of your environment, or how complex your environment is. So least complexity, maybe automatic updates would be a good thing. They automatic updates help prevent attackers from exploiting known bugs. And if it's not automatic, even if you're keeping up to date with those updates and understanding, like, hey, there's a new update coming out, we're going to implement it. Same thing, just different. But we try to automate as best as we can to alleviate some of the resource constraints. The next thing is logging. This is a big one, and I'll emphasize this one because of the fact that I respond to a lot of security incidents with organizations, and a lot of the times the organizations are not even logging anything. So if you're not, it's very difficult to kind of identify what happened if there are no records. So it's like if somebody robbed the bank and you have a security system, it's like, you have cameras, but your cameras aren't recording. So it, like, they robbed the bank, the cameras were on, but they didn't record anything. So when the cops asked for the camera, it's just nothing. Like they they just get nothing because you weren't implementing logging, or the cameras weren't logging the activity that it was recording. So you want to make sure that you're logging as much as possible, understanding what you're logging, because some of those log files can become a burden on some organizations. But you want to just tailor it to your organization. And we talked about secret management, no passwords in the code. And that's when you're running scripts and stuff, as much as possible. If it's a temporary thing, I get it, because you're doing, work, and you're trying to get things done. But you want to make sure that after the work is done, that information is purged. You want to make sure that information, that code that you use, or whatever you use to do like the maintenance or implementation, that it is removed from the environment, with those passwords or those secrets, so that they cannot be compromised later. So remember that. The next one is sandboxing. So this is something that they do in environments that are a little bit more complex, but you can use it to kind of test So basically, you build just an isolated environment where you can test things that may be a risk. So a lot of times with malware, when someone wants to test malware, they'll stand up a sandboxed environment of like, a network, and they'll run it on that to see what happens. And then if it explodes, it's fine because it's an isolated environment and you can just destroy it. Um, that's a good way to test kind of malware or things of a negative nature. The next control is a dependency allow list. So what this does is it prevents untrusted code from entering. So this one you can implement in your environment if you do not want certain types of scripts or code to be run. There's controls you can put in to not allow, like maybe you only allow certain Visual Basic codes during maintenance windows, or if you're going to use certain scripting like Python, maybe it's only allowed during a certain time by a certain administrative account. You just don't allow it by default, kind of thing. So you can kind of tailor in on that. The next control is rate limits. So rate limits is kind of, I guess another word for it is kind of throttling, or making sure that hey, maybe within when you're sharing data, only this data amount is allowed, unless there's some kind of request where we can extend it more. That way we know how much, what's a normal amount of data that should be flowing to and from our network. And that comes from monitoring. But it's a security concept, so that if you see a large amount of data exiting your environment, and you have rate limiters in place, or you see some bandwidth, and you're like an extreme amount of bandwidth from a certain component or department, you can kind of hone in on that and say, well, that's weird because that's outside of policy. We have rate limiters, so what's going on here? And it also helps stops brute force attacks for incoming amounts of data. So just be aware. And then the last, oh, I'm sorry about that. And then the last control is customer defaults. And when I say customer defaults, it's basically when you get, how do I explain? When you get like a new component or something new, you're not just deploying it with the default settings. So you say you get a new server and you're going to deploy it in your environment. You're not going to just put it in your environment like you bought it. You're going to go through. You're going to lock it down. You're going to make sure all the privacy settings that are that are governing within your organization are turned on. You're going to make sure all the security settings you need. You're going to make sure it's configured correctly. Before you deploy it. You're not just going to get a new router, a new switch, and just throw it in, plug things in, and go. You're going to stage those things prior to deployment. So that's kind of like the control of customer defaults, or a lot of people understand, like when you get a new component, you don't want to deploy it with the admin password, on it. Like you'll kind of pre-stage like your new router. You'll kind of go in, change config files, change the admin password to something the organization is that meets the standard, and then when you're deploying it, it's ready and it has those security settings. All right, so now we're moving on to for the in-person session. I got these questions, and you'll get a copy of these slides. But here are the questions, both non-technical and technical, that you can kind of go back to your organizations, inquire about, and then we can have a discussion during our next session on these topics. So at this time, that concludes the briefing. My email address is here on the screen. If you do have any questions, also our regional outreach coordinator, I've included his contact information. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Al, and let me stop sharing, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Gio. I don't currently see any questions in the chat window, so I'll open it up to all the attendees. Does anyone have any questions on this topic? Dead silence. Good job, Gio. You stunned him into silence.
So it was a lot of information, and I was trying to be cognizant of time today. So
No, it's good. It's good. And I know, in looking through a lot of the material that came through, um, uh, it goes through, in many senses, the software development lifecycle, how you create software and how vendors who sign up for this program commit to do things in a secure manner. Um, it's likely many folks on the call today aren't software developers themselves, don't sell commercial software. But I would guess that everybody purchases or licenses commercial software. So the way to view the material today is that all the things that Gio mentioned are good points to include in your software procurement process. As part of your work to manage your vendors, to select your vendors, to make sure they're doing what they say they're supposed to do, and then to monitor the software performance. The material in today's presentation can go into checklists that you use to one, query vendors who you're talking to about coming on board and asking them, how much of this do you actually do yourself? How many of these principles do you apply? And CISA's program does have a list of vendors who have committed to adhere to these principles. Um, in all, I think open sharing, I think, and I'll let Gio and the rest of CISA folks say for sure, but I know there's some question about whether this program is going to continue as an active program. But really the principles on it are very, very important because even if no further work is done in this area, it actually gives all of you again, checklist that you can use when you're looking at vendors and selecting vendors. So the key again is really using the information in the different vendor management stages that you've got for your organization and figuring out based on this, which of your vendors are higher risk than others. And maybe as you're selecting them, it might make a difference in who you select. So just a little perspective. So at this point, I'll throw it back open for any questions. Does anyone
and
have?
it looks like we got one
Oh,
in the
okay.
chat.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And it was asked, can you talk about logging? How much is adequate, and what types of rules should they be kept? Example of the types that are most common. All right, so logging. So logging is a tricky subject, and the reason why it's tricky is because it depends on your architecture. It depends on the what components you have, what software you have. So I'll just give a general kind of. So let's say you're using Windows, right? Within Windows, there are event logs, there are sys logs. Um, there are different logs that Windows is commonly set up to support. Um, and if you ask me, that's usually a good place to start. So turning it on first off, because it's not well, so it depends on which version of Windows you get, if it's turned on by default or not. So making sure that the logging is turned on is the first thing that I would recommend, if you need it. If you need it, because the thing about logging, so one, why are you logging? That's the first thing you got to ask yourself. Why? I've explained some reasons why, but this is you have to tailor this for your organization, and that's really important. So why are you logging? Do you have a compliance requirement? Are there regulatory compliance requirements? Are you just doing it to understand your environment? So understand that first. And then once you do start logging, the next thing you have to do is troubleshoot it, because those things are gonna, like I was talking about logs and how they grow in size depending on the logs, where you're storing them, how you're gonna store them. They grow as you're logging, because all the things that you're doing and depending on what you're logging. So on a firewall, for instance, you're going to be logging traffic. You're going to be logging different protocols that's transitioning through your environment. Um, on on a smart switch, kind of same thing. It's like a firewall. On the Windows environment, you're going to be logging uh, authentications. You're going to be logging logins, like when people log in. If they're authenticating, the failures, events. So within the Windows environments, event logs, and you can set these logs up to do different types of events. So some people wants to understand, like, when things are failing, or when data is moved, or Windows is talking to other components. There's different ways to set it up, and I'm sorry, I could go down this rabbit hole, but in general, that's just a general understanding. And if you want to have a discussion about your environment and what makes sense, we can do that. If it's a compliance requirement, like I see in the chat, then it's very specific. The compliance requirement will tell you exactly what you should be logging. It won't tell you probably the software or hardware to use, but it should tell you specifically, like, we need you to log event logs within this time period. You have to keep them for whatever certain time period, depending on which laws they're following. Like in the government, we have to keep things for like 7 years. So it's a record. So definitely want to go through your compliance standards and it should be very specific. If it's not, if it's broad, it's pointing to another document that actually is specific. So you might have to look at it, see if it's referencing another document, and that document will probably tell you the specifics of it. But if not, please let me know and I can help you kind of understand that.
Great question. Great question. Anyone else have any questions for today? Okay, then let's see. Um, in that case, let me do one last thing here. Of course, I'm kind of slow today, sorry. Okay, so with that, I want to thank everyone for attending today. As Giovanni indicated, this is the first session in our two-part series. The next one we have, which is more tailored to discussion, will be on Tuesday, September 23rd, 2 p.m. Hawaii time. And that one will have both the option for you to attend in person or remote via Zoom. So once we're done here today, I'll be sending out the a survey for today, a sign up form for the second session, and then the slides that Giovanni went through. So we're trying to do is give you a chance to take the material back. As he said, it was quite a bit today. Talk to your folks internally about it, ask questions, get feedback, and then we can come back together and talk about any feedback you've gotten, good or bad, and then potentially look at other steps we can take to help you out to implement a lot of these best practices. And then a final word, the actually last topic in our series for this year is going to be incident response. This one is incredibly important and also incredibly large. So, so if you thought today's one was a information dump, wait till the next one. But I encourage you all to come to the next one. I think incident response is a topic that you hear about in different forums, whether it's from a physical standpoint or from a cyber standpoint, and really being up on this and having your organization prepared for something that could go wrong is key to surviving going forward. So with that, I'm going to again thank you all for attending, and wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.
All right.
Mahalo.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.